Art and culture play humongous roles in the way that a culture expresses itself. We know that the arts can show us so much historical context. For example, a song that has been passed down for generations can teach us so much about the way of life, the economy, and the beliefs of a culture at that time. In addition, paintings, sculptures, and other kinds of artwork give us insight into cultures through the depictions of the people involved. In regards to the Cherokee Nation, storytelling has always been a way of passing down those traditions. Through these stories, we can hear what morals and lessons that the Cherokee people upheld and continue to uphold. To the Cherokee Nation, storytelling identifies the cultural values of what the culture deems important, as these stories teach many lessons to children. In addition, their stories show the spiritual aspect of their culture. According to the Cherokee people, everything has a spiritual connection woven through it. Because of this, they respected and expressed gratitude to each animal they hunted. Through the oral stories that have been passed down for generations, this shows the cultural values of respect and gratitude for what one has to take. Storytelling is just one example of cultural expression. Along with physical art pieces, music, and other forms of art, we can see cultural expression through game playing. For example, a popular ball game called Anesto has been thought to be a way that young boys were trained for battle, as it is a kind of like a variation of lacrosse. These young children learned coordination and fighting techniques. This shows us another aspect of historical culture, as we see that men were primarily the ones who trained for battle. Their use of the sticks in the game gives us further insights into their fighting techniques. Lastly, this game has lasted throughout generations of wars, remaining prominent in different religious ceremonies. This shows how even throughout colonization, the Cherokee people were able to keep parts of their cultural identity. This is important because their identity and artistic styles were not lost throughout history. Although these are just some examples of artistic expression, we can see how all forms of art are in fact forms of expression. From traditions that are passed down and kept alive throughout the years, we can see what kinds of values a culture upheld and gather insight on the ways of life, beliefs, and traditions of that culture.
The Cherokee Nation is the largest of the federally recognized tribes in the United States. They maintain their presence in 14 counties within present day Oklahoma. The Cherokee Nation has been around for more than 200 years with rich traditions, cultures, and beliefs. The Cherokees are very proud people, and their culture is learned and passed down from ancestor to ancestor. There is little recorded written history when it comes to the traditions and rituals of the Cherokee Nation. This is greatly in part of the horrific violence brought to the Cherokee people that killed thousands of their members and made them more conscious of keeping practices guarded against the outside. While some practices have changed over time, there were several main rituals that all are most Cherokee practiced throughout history and still practiced today. The first new moon of Spring Festival, which corresponds with the first new moon in March, is celebrated to signify the planting season beginning. As spring also signifies the seasons changing, this festival is accompanied by a great fire since everyone has been shut inside their houses all winter. The fire represents warming and melting of the cold, and stagnant signifying that cold's melting and making room for cleansing and purification. During this festival, the keeper changes and cleanses all the coals from homes and replaces the ones to symbolize new beginning and renewal from earth. This ceremony sets the tone for abundance of crops that will grow in the upcoming months. It lasts for 7 days. The green corn ceremony is held in late June, early July. Before the corn is ripe enough to eat, the elders fast for 6 days prior to the ceremony. The ceremony symbolizes cleansing and renewal as corn kernels and tobacco are thrown into the fire to let the gods know they are ready for the corn to mature and harvest. After the ceremony, all members of the community are served food made from the new corn. The mature green corn ceremony is in many ways a continuation of the green corn ceremony. It's held approximately 45 days after the green corn ceremony. However, unlike the green corn ceremony, this ceremony is typically held in August when the corn is ripe and mature. A scared tree is placed in the middle of the scared circle, and the men drink herbal drinks and participate in scarce dance to signify the purity of harvest and cleansing of the individual to receive the blessings of the harvest. During this ceremony, women are not allowed in the scared circle. The ceremony lasts 4 days. The great moon ceremony is celebrated in correspondence with the new moon, closest to the fall equinox. This is essentially the Cherokee New Year. Predictions are made for the upcoming year, friendships are rekindled, families come back together, and the entire community shares in the sense of anew. There is a reason, there's a resonating theme of rectifying, balancing, and making amends so the energy moves throughout the year for all people in a positive way. This is definitely a ceremony of celebration and coming together. The new fire ceremony also refers to referred to as the bonding bush ceremony is a ceremony to honor the thanksgiving to the gods and the spirits, showing gratitude for blessings and abundance. During this ceremony, a cleansing ritual is conducted near the river, stream, or other running waters. The scarce fire circle is also sparked, and everyone in the community throws a handful of tobacco into the fire to anticipate the fire and the gifts of abundance. This is the last ceremony before the winter sets in, and it's conducted in preparation for the upcoming winter months. As to say, the richer or warmer the fire is, the warmth will carry them through the cold. This ceremony is held for 5 days.
The Cherokee tribe is one that has faced many struggles throughout its long, rich history. One major struggle that the nation has faced since Europeans moved to America is trying to decide who gets to be accepted into the Cherokee tribe and who does not. In the early 1700s, there began a period of increased mixed racial marriages between white people and the Cherokee. Most of these relationships were white men marrying Cherokee women. For the men, marriage into the Cherokee tribe allowed them new trade opportunities into a previously closed-off community. For Cherokee women, many of their male Cherokee suitors had died due to the smallpox epidemic and battles with European settlers. At the time, Cherokee identity was based on clan, which means that if your mother was considered Cherokee, so were you. But in 1825, a new practice of Cherokee men marrying white women formed. Since these children would fall through the cracks with previous identity qualifications, the Cherokee National Council changed the qualifications so that the children of these Cherokee men and white women were considered citizens too. At this point, now the tribe had true Cherokee members and biracial members with both white mothers or white fathers. But when that law was passed, allowing for biracial white/Cherokee children to be members of the tribe, it excluded biracial children who were Black and Cherokee. According to the author Rebecca Nagel, the Cherokee Nation has a long history of anti-Black racism. Cherokee in the southern part of the U.S. bought and traded slaves, a practice which they adopted from the Europeans. And like the Europeans, there were many children who were born Black Cherokee. Cherokee tribes in America were pressured to follow the practices of white settlers at the time. So when white people had Black slaves, so did the Cherokee. And after the Civil War, the Cherokee were also pressured to release their enslaved Blacks. But these freedmen wanted to cement their place with the Cherokee people, since they embraced that as their culture and their people.
In the mid-1800s, it was estimated that half of the Cherokee tribe was of mixed race. This made the determination of Cherokee citizenship a difficult knot to untangle. The U.S. government forced the creation of the Dawes Roll, a list of all the members of the Cherokee tribe and their location, so that the U.S. government could figure out how to evenly distribute the land and allow access to white settlers. This was before the Cherokee had been emancipated and created their own constitution. Once the list was completed, it finally gave concrete answers as to who is Cherokee and who is not. Once the Cherokee defined their own independent government/constitution, it was originally decided that membership would be linear based on your ancestry from the Dawes Roll. If you didn't have descendants that traced back to a member on that roll, then you were not considered Cherokee. But the problem lies in that during the creation of the Dawes Roll, it was not mentioned who was, quote, true Cherokee, white Cherokee, or black Cherokee. So by the time the late 1900s rolled around, there were many descendants of black Cherokee freedmen who were denied the right to vote amongst the Cherokee Nation. There was a group of Cherokee people who did not want to give descendants of black Cherokee freedmen rights within the tribe because they were worried about a, quote, shift in political power in the tribe and taking away resources from the people who needed them most. But throughout the late 1900s and into the early 2000s, none of these issues were placed upon Cherokees who were mixed white. Biracial white Cherokee were a majority at the time, and because of that were given more power in society, but author Rebecca Nagel also believes that part of the favoritism towards mixed white Cherokees are white supremacist influences from the surrounding American society. In 2017, there was a federal court order that made the tribe restore rights and privileges to descendants of black Cherokee freedmen. While from a government standpoint, this problem was solved. But there has since been a lot of societal turmoil among the tribe about where each member stands on whether these black Cherokee members deserve, quote, the rights they were restored. According to my research, sadly, many do not support this change for the same reasons they did decades ago: a shift in political power, a diminish of resources, and a, quote, tainted history of a tribe that they love.
The history of the Cherokee Nation is pretty interesting in the fact that they were quite civilized even before the colonization of the Europeans. Many people think of the Native Americans as a group of savages that had no structure and they all battled each other's tribes. The real truth is that the Cherokees had a form of government where they competed peace treaties and held meetings in their council house that typically was placed in the middle of the town. There were treaties formed with the British along with other local tribes according to Britannia. It is culturally relevant today, especially for our group, because the native land for the Cherokees was in the Appalachian Mountains in North Carolina and southeastern regions such as Kentucky, Tennessee, the Virginias, Georgia, Alabama, and South Carolina. Because of numerous epidemics such as smallpox reducing their population and the settlements of the Europeans, they are now in Oklahoma and Texas, as well as Arkansas due to the Trail of Tears. The Cherokees were pushed from their land despite their form of government, written alphabet, and treaties that they had with the British. The Cherokees were very resourceful physically and intellectually. They had an assortment of tools such as picks, axes, along with the written alphabet and the government previously mentioned. The Cherokees were described as inherently sovereign, which means that the laws that the tribe had predate the New World discovery. The Cherokees were quite educated due to the fact that they were one of the only tribes that had a written alphabet. Many of the Cherokees were converted to Christianity, but that didn't stop them from taking up arms to try to stop the European expansion that was taking their land. It is important to know the history of the Cherokees because they were not savage people and in fact were quite capable society. It is also important to note that despite having decent education and government, it could not stop them from being displaced from their homeland.